Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I'm here with Nomlanaga Mhlauli-Moses, founder of HealthyBlackWoman.com. How are you doing today, Noma?
I'm doing great, boys. How are you?
I'm doing really good, really good. You're all the way in Botswana, and I am all the way in Chicago, but with technology, we're able to make this work. You wrote something recently that really that kind of resonated with a lot of people. That was very interesting. You were giving kind of a perspective on something that you saw in the media. You saw that Sherri Shepherd, the host of The View, was headed to divorce court, and this is the second time in a pretty short amount of time. I think her first divorce was in 2009. This divorce is 2014, obviously, and she was remarried in 2011. You had an interesting take on this, not in a way that was critical of Sherri, but really kind of gave us something that we could all kind of learn from. What was your take on what happened here?
I'm sure. First of all, the one thing that I was going to say is I actually like Sherri Shepherd. So I actually felt sad for her that this is something that she's going to now go through,
Me
as
too.
well as her little boy.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, but I basically drew about 4 points, and how I started off making the 4 points was I said, while I'm sad that this is happening to her, I'm also not entirely surprised when I think about it.
Hmm. Interesting.
Um, the
What?
first thing I pointed out was the timing. She got divorced, from the information that I got. She got divorced in 2011 from her first husband that she had been married to for about 9 years. I've been married for 9 years right now, and it feels like a lifetime when you're with somebody for that long, especially when you have kids. And the undoing of that, I can only imagine, is gut wrenching. And for her to be married 2 years after that, again, to me, it felt like a short time. I feel like when you undo something that heavy, you need time to heal from it, to process it, and sometimes you may even need therapy to help you process it. So I felt like the timing may have been wrong, and that may have been one of the factors.
Hmm. Interesting. So you think that? We've heard people talk about rebound relationships and why you shouldn't pursue them and you shouldn't pursue a serious relationship with someone from a rebound. But when I think about rebound, I'm thinking, the first 3 or 4 months after the breakup is done. But would you put this in the rebound category, or would you say that it's something else?
Well, they got married 2 years after her divorce was finalized, so the relationship may start off as a rebound, and then
Hmm.
down the line turns into something more, and then they get married.
Interesting.
So yeah, I'm mindful of saying, she should have kept this much amount of time, because some people can process, heal, and what have you in 6 months. Some people will take them 5 years. Some people are bitter for the rest of their lives. We can't put a timer on it. But I do feel like that was a short amount of time, which leads me to my second point, which I called probability.
Hmm.
I actually did a quick search for statistics. As it stands in the U.S., experts say 50% of marriages will work, 50% won't. So there's a 50% failure rate. When you go to a second marriage, it's 67% that won't work. So that means close to only 30% will work. Then you take it up to a third marriage, and it's 74, 75%. So only 25% of those have a chance of working.
Hmm.
So marriage, whether it's one, even if it's the first one, already has a probability of not working. But when it's a consequent one, and a consequent one is just unfortunately not likely to work. It's more likely to not work than it is to work. And unfortunately for Sherri, this was her second marriage, which again happened shortly after her first one.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I agree. I think that when you talk about divorce, or just broken relationships, period, I would argue that most people would say that the fact that your track record says a lot, right? If you're not able to, if your last four relationships weren't able to last, we like to believe that it's because we weren't with the right person or in the right situations, but it ultimately comes back to you most of the time. I
Yes.
mean, that variation kind of goes away. I'm a statistician, and one thing we talk about is that the bigger your sample size, the more your variety or your variation goes away typically, and the more you kind of are able to hone in on what the root cause is. And so, if you've had several relationships and none of them have worked, the root cause is typically you. I mean, that's just
Right.
a fact. So if you haven't gone through a lot of healing and a lot of growing and maybe even some therapy, then chances are that new situation you're coming into isn't going to fix everything. What's interesting too is that if people heard me clicking away while you were talking, I was actually looking up something that I read once when a relationship I was in kind of ended abruptly, and I didn't understand why. It was a great thing. I met this great woman, and it wasn't that long. And one day she just kind of didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't understand why, and I realized that it had just been maybe a few weeks since she'd left her last relationship before we started dating. And
Mm.
and that led me to actually do research on that's always been my healing process. When I've been disappointed, I learned that you are able to dig yourself out of the hole more quickly by sort of getting in touch with how you're feeling and why you're feeling this way. And because I didn't understand why do relationships make people so insane, and so I looked up, I did research on rebound relationships, and here's just one article I found that basically is consistent with a lot of articles that just say uh, don't pursue serious rebound relationships as a general rule, or you probably shouldn't. And two, don't pursue those relationships with people who are on the rebound. And what they're saying is that basically after a divorce, you're feeling a variety of emotions, consisting of maybe confusion, anxiety, loneliness, depression, low self-esteem, emotional vulnerability. So what happens is many people cover up those feelings in their new relationship as part of their healing process, and they say that that rebound relationships are tempting to the person that is being used as the replacement. Because that's what they said. They said effectively you're being used as the replacement for whatever that person lost, and the person hasn't had time to heal or to grow and to learn what they did in their last relationship to cause it to end. Because most of the time we play a role. It takes two to tango. We play a role in the
Right.
outcomes in our lives, and so they said that these relationships are attractive to the replacement person because the person is emotionally vulnerable. They share their feelings with you. They let you know how much they appreciate you because you kind of stepped in to fill this void in their heart. In fact, there was a song. I think it was Cher who had a song called "I Found Someone to Take Away the Heartache, to Take Away the Loneliness." Yeah, so I'm not gonna sing because I can't sing. But something like "I've been feeling since you've been gone." So she's basically saying I found somebody to replace the person that I was missing, when really you have to be a whole person. From what I would argue, you have to be a whole person in order to receive and give love in an appropriate way. If you come in as half a person and you say you complete me, you're my other half, that's a dangerous kind of mentality to have, I would say, as opposed to saying I'm already whole, you're already whole. Now we're going to come together and make the new whole greater than the sum of its parts. So that's my take on that. But I'll let you go to the next point you wanted to make in your article.
Sure. Sure. The other point that I made was what factor did fame play into it? And Sherri Shepherd is pretty famous. From what I know, like I said in the article, I used to watch The View, and before that, I've seen her in several comedies. I know she's also a comedian. I think at one point she was hosting a couple of other game shows and so forth. So she fits in that category for me, for somebody whose career has pretty much been successful, and she's famous. Now, that being said, people who are famous don't necessarily make good relationship partners.
They typically don't, and really it's not just fame. I think it's just busy, people being busy.
Right.
If
Right.
if you're that busy, I think people are naive to really think, okay, I can have this whole relationship over here, because being that busy is you're already married to something, right? And then
Right.
after having this whole relationship over here, I can start a whole new relationship over there, and I can be a complete person for both relationships. And I think that's somewhat naive. And I'll just confess that a long time ago, I kind of decided that I didn't want to be in a relationship with a woman that was extremely busy. But again, it was a rule that was kind of flexible. But the truth is that if there's only 168 hours in the week, and somebody's busy for a big chunk of that time, they're not going to have a lot of time for you, and that's what leads to some of the problems that you've seen. Sherri actually experienced this. Again, I'm not saying this is why it happened, but she did say that part of the reason she ended her last marriage was due to infidelity by her husband. And again, I'm not defending whatever happened or whatever he might have done, but what I can say is that I've always believed, I can say I've always believed as a man that if I'm in a relationship with a woman and I leave her alone for the majority of the time and I'm never ever there for her, I shouldn't be surprised if someone else has filled that spot. If that person has a need and you're not filling it, unfortunately, the reality in life is that somebody else is always willing to fill that need. We'll just say that. Please continue.
Right. And then the other thing is when we're talking about fame, which leads me to my next point, which is I hate to generalize this way, but it seems that it works better if two people are going to be in a relationship and one of them is going to be famous. It seems to work better if the man is famous and not the woman.
Really?
And in this particular instance, it's the woman who was famous, which leads me to my next point. And she was the primary breadwinner. And again, as I said in the article, I said, we like to believe that we've moved on in society to a point where, men can be, I can't remember what they call them, stay at home, full time,
right.
whatever, all that, which we typically expect women to do. And I personally don't believe in rigid roles. I think that we should allow each other flexibility on both sides, because again, if you're rigid as a woman in what you expect from a man, then you also have to be rigid about the expectations that should be placed on you. And I've never seen myself as a person who will only look after children and clean the house. I've always thought I had more to offer both my kids, my husband, and the world. So again, with men, they should be able to do the same thing. But the point that I'm making is Sherri Shepherd was the primary breadwinner. And the way I'll put it is I don't think that being a primary breadwinner is necessarily always handled correctly. There's men who cannot deal with a woman being the primary breadwinner. And then there are women who cannot deal with being the primary breadwinner. And that can cause a lot of conflict in the relationship. And again, with Sherri and her husband, we don't know. But that was one of the points that came to my mind. And I think it's a point that could have played out in the relationship and the relationship ending.
Well, I think, and just so people know, we're not just sort of talking about Sherri as a point of gossip or anything. We're talking about this as a learning point, and that's what you do with Healthy Black Woman, is you help people to learn the things that they need to know in order to live a healthy, happy life. And,
Right.
it's funny, that last point you made, I think that primary breadwinner point, that's probably going to be the one that's going to get you in a lot of trouble. But I think it's a point.
I'm used to trouble.
Right, and you handle it well, and you tell the truth, and that's what I love about talking to you. And I think, despite any trouble you might get, sometimes honesty doesn't take us to a point of political correctness, right? I think that when we look in our soul of souls and we're really being honest with ourselves, we have to admit that sometimes, we force our society in a direction that may not always be natural. We may tell men that they should behave a certain way, but they may not want to. We may tell women to behave a certain way, but they may not be comfortable with that. And I can say that it seems to me that as a society, we're still more comfortable when the man is out working and bringing home resources. I mean, and some would argue, biologists would argue, we've been wired this way for the last X millions of years, or however many hundreds of thousands of years human beings have been around. I don't know how long we've been around. I don't know if we've been around 100,000 years or what, but we've been around a long time. Let's just say that. And so, you go back, 1,000 years, that man who had the most female attention was the one who could go out and conquer and provide and protect. He could go out and hunt a bear and bring home bear meat and feed the kids. And if he couldn't bring home bear meat, other men made fun of him. Women didn't want to be with him. And they didn't have political correctness, from what I understand. When we lived in caves, they just did what felt natural. Now, I'll say this about Sherri. I've only met Sherri one time. I interviewed her one time for AOL Black Voices, and I know people who know her, and I can say this. The consistent message I've heard from people is that she is a very down to earth, good person. More so than most people, of her stature. And that was the impression I got when we had our back and forth. And the other thing that I know about Sherri, that a lot of people know, is that her son suffers from autism, and I would imagine that Another struggle, another hurdle in such a marriage would be, having a child with a disability, an expensive, time-consuming, difficult disability that not everybody understands. Not everybody has the patience for that. And it's one thing to have a child with a disability, but which brings strain on a relationship. A lot of marriages end because of this sort of thing. But it's another thing when another man is helping raise your child with a disability. There are, again, this is something that biologists will confirm. And this is something that led me to actually speak up a little bit more about how we should really view the single parent phenomenon that's happening in the United States. Not to say that we would condemn someone for being a single parent, but to see it as something that you endure because you have to. That's very different from planning it from the beginning. Just saying, okay, I don't need a man. I just want him to give me his sperm so I can have a baby. Well, you're taking a risk there, because I can tell you two things that are fundamental facts. And if anybody doesn't like the fact that I'm saying this, then go research it yourself and you'll find out. One fundamental fact is that a large majority of kids that get abused by men are abused by the boyfriends of the mother. I know a couple of cops who worked in the Crimes Against Children unit who said that, and again, we're deviating from Sherri Shepherd. Not to say her man was an abusive man, but I'm saying that I'm making this point because it fits. When the guys I know that worked in the Crimes Against Children unit said very consistently there would be abuse where sexual abuse, a lot of cases where the mother's boyfriend was trusted too much too soon and was abusing the child while she was away. She had no idea that her daughter was being forced to have sex with this man while she was at work because he threatened to kill her if she told anybody. And sometimes it's the son too, either getting beaten up or sexually abused, maybe by a guy who maybe spent time in prison or something like that. Happens all the time, and I have to say this. Second point that I think is important is, and this was another study we actually published in Your Black World, that said that fathers who or men who are raising children that are not their own have a wired biological disposition to care about that child less than they would their own child. They had a phenomenon for it, an anthropological explanation, but they basically compared it to other mammals and animals in the woods where, I mean, bears, for example, a bear can literally eat your children. I'm not kidding. And other animals might just kill the child, or because they're competing with this male who is the offspring of another man, and they don't want that male around subconsciously, and I can't. And human beings, we are mammals, and they said, in fact, they actually said that one reason that other mammals, and we're in the mammal family, we're just smarter mammals, but we have the same wiring, similar wiring. They said that part of the reason that the mammal or the male mammal might do this to a son, or even a daughter too, or just to get rid of them, is because animals don't play. Animals don't just mistreat you. Sometimes they'll just kill you. Is because the female goes into some sort of biological process. I can't remember the exact word, but literally it makes her more fertile, makes her want to have another child to replace the child that was lost. So literally, animals have tapped into the fact that if I get rid of this baby here, you're going to want to have a baby with me. And that is something that puts that child in danger. So I think the translation is for human beings. When you've got this child that's from another man and you're in a new relationship, things may not always go as perfectly as you might expect. And then in the case of Sherri Shepherd, you're talking about a child who also has this disability, and there's no telling how much stress that might have put on their relationship. So that's what I'm seeing here. I just have to call it like I see it. I'd love to hear what people think. And I told Noma I was going to take 10 minutes of her time, but I've taken 18 minutes and 21 seconds, and she's got things to do. So I'll let you get the last word, Noma, and then we'll bounce on out of here.
I think just to bring it back to Sherri Shepherd, this wasn't, even though I'm bringing it back to her, it wasn't really about her, but it was just to point out that the odds were heavily stacked against this particular couple because of, the fame and a step parent. Then on top of that, she was the breadwinner. There's so many reasons. And then, of course, it was her second marriage. So all I'm saying is, in terms of a relationship perspective, she had a lot of the key indicators of why a marriage would work. And I think even having tried hard, it still just may not have worked because the odds were heavily stacked against them.
Well, we wish Sherri Shepherd the best, and also, as Noma mentioned, the point of this conversation was to talk about all of us, not just Sherri Shepherd. But there are things we can learn from the experiences of others. And I say, if you get married and you want it to work, go read a book. There are, millions of people who've gone through the same thing you're going through. Don't just shoot from the hip. Don't just assume that you're going to instinctually know how to make things work. Get help. Go read a book. And then also same thing goes for raising children. Don't just assume you know all the answers. Go find people that know the answers so you can do it right instead of looking back and wishing you'd done things different. Well, thank you so much, Noma. I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
And thank you all for checking us out at Your Black World. And also, this is Nomlanaga Mhlauli-Moses from HealthyBlackWoman.com. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.